That picture, that kills me.
Thanks everybody for coming back again. I know 2 lives in one night. Aren't we class? Aren't we amazing? And Michael twice one night. 3 times if you actually went and watched the stream. So if you didn't go and watch the stream, you don't know what's happening. You know, shout out to Brujo. I like the music. We just discussed how hard it was to get the music and stuff. But yeah, this is the after show for Michael and Maute. They were talking the philosophy of consciousness. So if I can just move them into the head positions. Yeah, that should be right. And Simos is taking it up. Get out of there, Simos. There we go. Now everybody's in the right places. So thank you all for coming back again. We're going to try and continue on the conversation with a few bit of questions from other people and stuff like that. Shout out to everyone in the chat. Shout out to Mark, Gur, Dargendorp. Who else we got here? We got Brojo and all the other people who are lurking and all the rest of it. So thank you all for coming back. Michael, Christopher, who would like to give a slight synopsis of what happened earlier? For those who didn't see for the stream. We figured out what consciousness is, basically, yeah.
We just pretty much figured out the hard problem, turned it into soft serve ice cream, and then served it up as a solution. It is known as strawberry shortcake. No, let's not be silly. We were just talking about consciousness. I was bringing up the research done by Anil Seth. I was using fun little bumper sticker buzzwords like, or buzz phrases like perception is a controlled hallucination, right? In the same sense that hallucinations are uncontrolled perceptions. And we're all sharing a hallucination right now. It's just that we happen to call that reality. It's a hallucination because we're living in simulations that our brain predicts. And the only time we actually come into contact with reality is when those predictions are incorrect. And then we started talking about what is it that makes something conscious? Are there ways to ask questions to peel away the layers of what it means to be conscious? Can we observe it in behavior? Does it have to be human? Does it have to even be an animal with a nervous system? Once you start asking those lines of questions, you kind of go towards a very different philosophical path, towards something called panpsychism. A lot of people don't like panpsychism because it is the belief that consciousness is a fundamental element of the universe, and some people quickly would like to hijack that to form fit it into their pre-existing ideas of deism or something like that. So panpsychism is like a weird bugaboo phrase, but from my perspective, it's where people land when they start asking these questions, because the answers are so messy. And that's mostly what we talked about.
Yeah.
What did you think of it, Simos?
Rubbish. Yeah. What was that guy? Rogers? Someone. No, interesting. I mean, I think when these things come down to, a lot of getting definitional straight, it depends, as Christopher said, on your point of view. Are you an idealist, a dualist, or a monist? And, I think that's really the starting point that most people philosophically come from. And then what they determine to be consciousness is derived from that particular viewpoint. So it's really tricky. And personally, I'm a... Oh, God, I just want to say so many jokes now, right? I'm not a monist, I'm a whingist. And I think that everybody else is probably wrong. And I think that obviously there's a physics substrate, which you can't avoid, I can't avoid. And that's my basic position. So, of course, I think that the brain is the grounding for consciousness. I don't know how. It is a hard problem, of course, but evolution is the thing which determines it for me. And I believe that we humankind are evolved creatures, and therefore consciousness is more than likely evolved along with humankind.
So to be clear, you're a monist. when you're pondering the hard problem of consciousness.
I tried to.
I love fucking
tried-
Michael's face.
I
It's
think-
just like, oh, fuck me. He went there. He went there.
Yeah. Well, no, of course. I find that the most stimulating position.
I'm not a dualist. I'm a trialist.
Another beautifully bald man. Welcome, Mark.
Seems like
Yes,
a thing
Mark.
to do. Hello.
We were having a nice
Oh,
little
I'm so glad you joined, man. I was afraid
Oh,
you were going
thanks.
to go back to bed.
No. I'm up now. I got my mind thinking now. Yeah.
Mark, get some sleep, man. That's
What do you mean?
That sounded like a threat.
you said you've been
got
up
me
all night,
thinking now,
right?
No, I didn't say I'd been up all night. I said it just got me
okay.
thinking last night. No, I had a bit of
okay.
trouble getting to sleep last night because it kind of got my mind rolling kind of thing. But, I watched the stream and then that put me to sleep. So, all good. I'm fine.
Can we
But
talk about
thank
that?
you for
That's
your
something.
concern, Michael.
Do you mind if I mentioned sleep and dreaming? A lot of people who watch the channel know that I would generally be an insomniac. I would probably sleep maybe 6 to 8 hours, but in chunks. It's generally closer to 6 than it would be 8. It's in short bursts and stuff like that. And then I'll probably do a night where I don't sleep at all. And then one day of the week I do 10 hours, 11 hours or so. That's generally my sleep pattern. I can't say that I don't dream, but I don't remember an awful lot of my dreams. Also, with smoking weed and stuff, that does stop you from dreaming. From what I've written, stops you from hitting REM sleep. I've been like this with insomnia from a very young age, from about 11 or so. That's the way that my sleep pattern and the way that I've just fallen into long before the internet and stuff like that. Now, I know I'm slightly mad and I know that my memory isn't the best of it. But can you confirm I'm not crazy, or should I do something about this, Marty?
Sleep is super important, brother. And also, the smoke actually doesn't help. Like smoke and drink it's the complete. Unfortunately, it's the complete opposite. They sedate, and sedation is not the same as getting the proper non-REM and REM stages of sleep because of the processes that we talked about before. Like nature has a system for what to do with your brain when you're asleep, and it needs all of that time to do it properly.
With the exception, if I can, sorry, Simos, if I can.
Go ahead.
To a certain point, a few people in the community I've shared this with and stuff like that. I don't like to genuinely dream, because I don't want to say that my subconscious hates me, but the last couple of times that I've dreamt, and actually remembered vividly, rather than just this, that, and the other, they've been quite graphical and not so nice, as in watching and feeling.
That matches data, actually. Data on dreams reflects the idea that a majority of dreams are more threatening than they are peaceful.
I remember my nails getting pulled out of my hands, being tortured. They're generally not quite good, so I would prefer to not do that.
The dreams
My
that I
dreams are usually
remember,
pretty fun.
Pardon?
the dreams that I've remembered have been like the ones that I remember have been like movies kind of thing. It's been quite an experience that I've been watching a movie, and the movie was great, and I've loved every second of it. The other thing I know about myself is that when I wear socks in bed, I get nightmares. I don't know why.
I'm looking at Michael. Michael's face. I've been ignoring Michael making faces at me, right? But I can't say that. Those are fucking socks.
Yeah,
Well,
I just
That is
It's more likely to do with core temperature than that one.
yeah.
maybe, yeah.
So, yeah, something to do. I would suspect a couple of people have said, core temperature rises, and then that causes, sort of, yeah.
Speaking of which, I am going to go on a tangent. I am interested in these new cooling blankets that bring the temperature down, because a lower temperatures are better for sleep, right? If you can't sleep, taking a cold shower to bring your core body temperature down can help facilitate it, because it's that associative learning. Since that's what your body does, it starts releasing the melatonin and all that stuff. they're like $800, but I think that they, as bougie as they sound, I am fascinated with sleep the older I get. I want to get 8 hours of sleep so bad. It almost gets to the point of obsession.
Well, I had a lot of trouble sleeping, and what did it for me was vitamin D. I had a vitamin D deficiency, which is weird for an Australian, but never mind. So, as soon as I started taking vitamin
Never
D,
noticed.
yeah,
Interesting.
Yeah, because kangaroo meat is chock full of vitamin D.
That leads into what I was going to ask about, actually, because I was at my surgeon, actually, it was. And basically, because of my breathing condition, I haven't been able to sleep for more than about 2.5 hours at a time.
right.
And that's been like that for a couple of years now. And so I'm really struggle with that, of course. And I was self-medicating edibles, cannabis edibles, and then I would get 4 or 5 hours sleep, no problem, 6 hours sometimes. And I'd wake up just totally, whoa, everything's fine again. Unfortunately, I just told this to my surgeon, or one of the doctors in the surgery team, and she said, "Oh well, cannabis is a gateway drug, so we don't want you to be doing that."
Oh yeah,
I'm not sure studies support that. To be honest with
I
you.
was going to say, well, look, you do realize that I'm very old now, and
well, Smokey Joe is going to change it completely here in America.
But you brought up a really interesting point there, which is if it's not going to do me much good to get 6 hours sleep because I'm not achieving REM sleep, because I'm medicating with cannabinoids or cannabis, then what are the recognized drugs that doctors give you to help with sleep problems? She said, oh, well, if you're having problems with sleep, and I immediately thought of opioids, right, which I don't really want to get into because that's a whole nother addiction, right? If there is a gateway drug, I think that's probably going to be one of them.
Yeah.
Well, that's the end. Like,
yeah, quite possibly.
That's not just the gateway; it's inside the house and standing in the living room. Yeah.
So I was kind of confused, really, and I wondered what you guys thought of that, and that reflects then on MathPig as well. Well, maybe just laying off the weed before sleep and then having some kind of opiate or whatever would do them good to get REM sleep if that's possible on opiates.
Well, I
Can
do
interject here.
The
Oh,
10
go
hour,
ahead,
that day of the 10 hours, because it's a lot of sleeping and not smoking or anything like that, I generally would dream in that night, and as I say, they're generally not good, which is encouragement for me to not want to do it any other day.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, and I'm not a medical professional. I don't think anybody here is.
Robbie's
so,
crazy. It's okay. Robbie's crazy.
Don't
I've
take
come
any
to
of this.
terms with it.
My wife is, so by proxy, I got a little bit of credibility there. No, just kidding. But I had similar issues. I have, I guess I should say, a form of complex PTSD, which prevented me from full night sleeps for the better part of a year. So I tried self-medication. I tried sleep pills, melatonin, the gambit, right? I did my own research. My wife showed me research, like the studies out there on, well, first of all, the importance of sleep, getting the proper amount of sleep, and that varies from person to person, anywhere from like 6 to 10 hours, right? But like the health risk associated with like not sleeping are insane. Like the risk of everything basically skyrockets. And speaking of like self-medication, not to get like too dark, right? But all the health risks associated with that are also really negative.
Right.
And the type of sleep that's achieved through those substances, like Chris was saying, are not the type of sleep that you actually need. It's just you like turning the lights out. You're not actually getting like REM sleep or anything like that. For me, and again, you take that with a grain of salt, it was as bland and banal as it sounds, a good day's exercise, laying off stimulants, caffeine after a certain amount of time to get myself naturally tired, and then melatonin, like over the counter melatonin.
Interesting.
That helped me get my sleep cycle. It's pretty well regulated now, but yeah. Chris,
Melatonin can be a little dangerous, though. The reliance on it. I would certainly, as Michael would probably say, see your doctor and talk to him about the risks. And absolutely. So I want to get back to the topic, because one thing that sort of makes me curious, and I touched on it in chat, is the reasons why our mind, or our conscious mind, I should say, to be more specific, can override unconscious functions. Sometimes, you know what I mean? Like, we can override our breathing to a certain degree until carbon dioxide reach a certain level, or we pass out, kind of thing. But there's other things we can kind of override, and other things that it would seem useful to override, like the pain response, for instance, that we can't, right?
Well, you can. I mean, with the understanding of the gate theory of pain, I mean, this isn't necessarily mind over matter, but there are certain very specific ways that the way that pain travels, right? If we're talking about an aching pain, then you can kind of interrupt that with short bursts of less intense pain. So, for instance, when you get hurt and you automatically start rubbing your skin, that rubbing of your skin, that mechanical stimulation, sets a different set of nerve fibers than the regular pain ones that act as a gate to inhibit or excite whether or not your brain gets that signal. Some people, through meditation, are able to facilitate the gate theory of pain, the facilitation of inhibition through meditation. Usually it's done internally through things like endorphins, or externally through things like heating, cooling, or ointments that facilitate the triggering of receptors that are responsible for, like, in America, there's a product called Icy Hot. When you first apply it, it's cool, and then after a while it gets warm. So it's triggering receptors that are distracting the nerve fibers' ability to get to the spinal cord and give the substance P signal a chance to be processed.
Yeah, but that's kind of sort of stimulus, like sort of other stimulus using the same unconscious system to override pain. I'm talking about how we can sort of consciously stop breathing and stop that in a conscious way.
Yes, and so I addressed it kind of in passing, but what I was saying, that the model of the gate theory are those things that I mentioned, and people have used meditation to consciously work those levers, so to speak, that are responsible, that are normally only pulled through endorphins or mechanical stimulation. So, like, that was a background to the fact that people through meditation are able to do that, and through breathing exercise and stuff like that, and attentional focus, because it's really about distraction.
Yeah, I don't know how effective they are on sort of acute pain and things like that. But
it's not as it is not as useful as taking a pain pill, right? Like, and this is the problem with sleep schedules. The best thing for your sleep schedule is something called sleep hygiene, and a day where you start from the time you wake up. You know when you stop drinking caffeine. You know when you're going to work out. You know when you're going to eat. You know when to stop looking at a screen. You know when to take your melatonin, right? Like, all of these things are like a very hard day's work just to get a good night's sleep. The same thing applies to pain, right? Through meditation, which is super hard work, you can bring down a level of pain, assuming that we're talking about a scale. On a scale of 1 to 10, if you're suffering from a 7, through these exercises, you might be able to bring it down to a 6 or 5. I am not claiming that you can bring it down to a 1.
Yeah.
Right. But I mean, it is kind of like a mind over body light. Right. It's kind of like
I certainly think we have impacts on our body's functionality, but the question is not only the hard problem of consciousness is sort of why do we think, or why do we have this consciousness, but also why does that consciousness have a limited influence over our body's functionality at all? You would imagine that sort of the autonomous systems that we have, they're there for a very good reason. Why are we able to use our mind to have this influence in the first place?
I think it's an after the fact thing. I think that it is because of the way our self-awareness is, we can notice patterns of association such that through my mind and perception, I can now engage in prediction and behaviors that'll stop an automatic process. For instance, if something scares me accidentally and I completely realize it's not a threat to me, but my heart is still going 990, I have breathing techniques that I practice. And through that recognizing that breathing and heart rate are related in such a way that if I purposely control one, I'm kind of wagging the dog by the tail on the other.
Yeah.
So that kind of thing for me helps demonstrate like the connection.
But the heart rate and the breathing are both the reactions to you know what I mean? Like both aren't really the dog. The dog is the fear response kind of thing. So
well, it depends on how you look at it. So are you looking for a strictly mental way of stopping it? Of just like turning a mental switch of like, oh, I'm perceiving something, let me not perceive it now. Like that kind of mental influence?
I think I'm trying to sort of say, I don't like. I guess I'm trying to provoke of why we have this influence at all. Why we can influence autonomous systems at all, and I want to tie it back into that's probably what I would define as sort of consciousness, the ability to control autonomous systems to a degree at all, kind of thing. As opposed to what I wouldn't consider consciousness, which would be, you know, a plant simply reacting to external stimuli. And that's probably...
And so you're assuming free will in this example, it sounds like.
I would assume free will. I think... So free will is a difficult one. I will concede that the universe seems mostly deterministic. I would concede that. I'm not a hard determinist, though. I'm sort of more a compatibilist kind of position. So we behave basically like there's free will. Let's face it. Hard determinists, and determinism is the idea that you don't have free will, or hard determinism. If people are watching and don't know what the hell I'm on about, Micheal can certainly tell you lots about it. Well, just that you know, all of your actions are a product of your brain, which is a product of you know, physical interactions, which are you know, entirely physical, and so there is no real free will. A hard determinist would say it's all just deterministic processes producing the appearance of free will, the illusion of free will, and I'm not on board with that. I think that and it's hard to prove. It's hard to prove or disprove. So hard determinism is one that I've had many arguments on and many things, but I think I've gone sideways here, so someone stop me.
I'd just say that Micheal seems determined not to jump in on that particular subject.
Philosophy of mind.
Hold on a second. I want to be able to.
Well,
I'd like
just
to
want
give Mark an opportunity to get back on track. Like what I said was the reason why you went into that is because I said it sounds like free will is baked into what you're saying, because you kept using language like choosing to change an autonomous being. Yes. Right. And so, and maybe I'm paraphrasing, but it was language like that.
So I do think, because I'm a compatibilist, I think that free will is compatible with a deterministic universe. I think there is something about us that can choose what we do. but that's just my particular stance. And the problem I've had with determinists is they say, hey, everything is already sort of, so it's your brain saying that. And I could say, well, I'm gonna throw my coffee cup against the wall and run down the street, something completely unexpected that you wouldn't expect, that you can't say that was determined. They said, but that was determined by your brain. And it makes me very frustrated and sort of go, well, there's nothing I could do to show that I have free will, no matter how random or arbitrary the action I take. You can say, hey, that was determined, which frustrates me.
I always hate people like that.
Well, they've got a point. I can't show that wasn't determined by physical responses in my brain, which leads back to how the atoms were organized, which leads back to
true.
Mark,
You can't.
One
Can
moment,
I
Midnight.
just say something here, which is
Oh,
that
okay, Simon.
if we consider that, again, I look at these things from an evolutionary standpoint. The brain is part of the central nervous system, and therefore there is a symbiotic relationship between the sensory data inputs, or our senses, and the system which controls, in the way we're saying, these are autonomous. I don't think they are autonomous. Systems. The whole thing is one unit, right? When we talk about higher mammals, so I just don't think that the conversation or the split between saying hard determinism or like your position is, or saying that free will is could have done otherwise. I don't think either of those positions can be correct necessarily, so because there is literally an evolved process by which there's a feedback loop between the two. So who's to say which one is going to be the dominant at one particular time? You can't say that.
Person.
You just can't say that. You can't say that if given X, then Y will happen, because it depends on what state the feedback loop is in. How much sleep have you had? How much? What oxygen have you taken in? There are too many variables, right, to say that it's going to be X, Y, or Z, to say hard determinism the thing. Of course, what it comes down to for me personally is this hard problem of consciousness has not been solved, and if it could be solved in some way that was a unified theory, say, of between brain and body, then maybe there's a point about hard determinism. But I still don't think that you're going to get to that simply because when you talk about emergent properties, they don't have to be reducible, and that's the pretense in limited reducibility. That I think it all
Emergent property is not an explanatory. It has no explanatory power.
Right. Well, if it's the case that
I'd
it is
probably
an
agree with
emergent
that.
property, then we're not going to be able to explain it by hard determinism. That's my point.
Well, it's a lot of emergent properties we can kind of explain. Obviously, the mind's a lot more complex than some of those, but
That's why I was talking about reducibility. If it's one that is reducible, then yes, we stand a chance to do it. If it's not one which is necessarily reducible, then we don't stand a chance of doing it. That doesn't mean it's not an emergent property still, though.
well, that's true.
If we can stick to the human brain, there are things called the neural correlates of consciousness. So that is its own project. NCC is the abbreviation. And if you were to look up NCC, you'd be able to find neural correlates of consciousness. And this is kind of like the idea of, okay, this is what we know the brain looks like in conscious people. Here's what it looks like in unconscious people. What's the minimum amount to sufficiently say, that somebody is conscious or not? And that can help limit the conversation, right? We can kind of leave free will and determinism off the table. We can kind of just talk. We can leave panpsychism off the table. We can just talk about what human consciousness is all about, and raise questions that are pertinent specifically to human consciousness. Or we can keep going on with other things. I'm just making suggestions.
No. Well, I mean,
No, no.
like language. I mean, that was one of the things which is pertinent to human consciousness, as
Well,
defined.
thanks for bringing that up, Simus. That was an
You're
interesting part in the side chat that I think somebody brought up, Michael, and you wanted to bring that up here. Do you have that offhand, Michael? Or do you remember? Do you have a paraphrased version of it? You're muted right now.
The conversation was between Mark and myself, actually.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I was about to say, I
Mark.
think Mark was a big player in that.
Oh,
yeah.
perfect.
Mark was getting in there with it.
I'm not sure. Yeah, language as part of consciousness. So language for me, it's very difficult to say where calls, which is sort of, you know, and Simus was talking about bird calls, and I totally grant that it's communicating information, as a lot of calls do, like the monkey calls for danger and certain other calls do, but whether that would rise to the level of what we'd consider a language. A language kind of has syntax and a number of working components to it that calls generally don't. So again, for so many of these things, again, it all depends on what you define language as, or what you define consciousness as. And you know, the irony is not lost on me. It's that your consciousness is defining consciousness. But
the only time our consciousness is in our consciousness is when we're talking about consciousness.
Right. It's kind of a consciousception that you've got going on there.
I love it.
The whole idea, because chimpanzees, apparently, I was reading this. I'll see if I can find the article, but I was reading that they're sort of approaching language. They're getting their syntaxes and their calls are developing, kind of thing. So, and I sort of mentioned this in chat. Consciousness and sentience, especially for me, isn't. To me, it seems like it's a spectrum, not a binary state. Something isn't conscious or not conscious. It seems like there's sort of, once it passes this point that we say, hey, they're aware of a certain amount of things, or they reach a certain level, they're conscious now. But there's not a lot, you know, something just under, there's not a lot that you sort of go, well, why isn't that conscious? And then the next thing under that, yeah, well, why isn't that conscious if the thing just above it is? And it can get into one of those real gray shades of, okay, well, this down here, that should be, you know, I guess
that sounds like lines of research to me.
Yeah, I suppose so. But I guess it's you know, I just want to sort of say, like with the word language, we've got to be careful of what we mean by conscious. And I guess get on the same page of the definitions, kind of thing. Yeah,
Well, when I looked into what you were saying, Mark, it did seem that
Thank you for joining, Ger.
A lot of the definitions in the dictionary were specific about talking about people as being using language and not animals.
Right.
And they were making, I think, the same distinction that you more than eloquently made about syntax and meaning, possibly, or at least some kind of abstract meaning, I would think. So I kind of agreed with you after I'd looked it up, but then the thought that went through my mind, and maybe Michael can talk on this, is that well, of course, you know, one of the reasons we find language so ubiquitous and necessary is because we're social mammals, and other social mammals also have a strong dependence upon communication. Let's not call it language for querying the pitch, so to speak. And so, you know, what's the difference between communication and language? And therefore, are we just highly evolved communication is language? In which case, what do we mean by highly evolved? So, yeah, your definition does answer the question, Mark. I'm not saying it doesn't. I just wanted to like downplay it a little bit and just say, look, is that all we mean by that? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, this is kind of what I was trying to ask you. Part of the question I was trying to ask you on my channel, Chris, was, and I'm not saying, So what got me thinking about this was historically kind of how the conversation has been situated, that there's something unique specifically about human consciousness that sets us apart from animal sentience. And I don't really agree with that. I'm just trying to figure out a way to formulate the question, because there does seem to be a lot of goalpost moving with respect to this conversation, because at first it was consciousness. Humans are conscious, other creatures aren't. Well, once we learn more about biology and human physiology, well, that doesn't seem to be the case. Okay, now we can talk about animals being consciousness. But language does seem to be, and I could be completely wrong about this because I don't know, but I'm thinking of like language processing centers in the brain and how human beings learn language. That does seem to be somewhat unique. I don't necessarily think, maybe we can just draw a distinction here between language and communication. Language seems a little bit more complicated, kind of like what Mark was talking about. Language has syntax, it has tone, it has all that other jargon, right? Whereas, we can communicate without those sorts of things, non-verbally, even communication.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
But there does seem to be something unique about the human brain. And again, maybe it's not, but for the sake of this question, there does seem to be something unique about the human brain that allows for language processing that we don't see in other species. And I'm kind of thinking here, kind of loosely, kind of Noam Chomsky's idea of like language development and language syntax and the universalness of language in humans. There we go. Thank you. So yeah, Chris, how would you
infinite generativity from a finite set of words, right? Like we're the only species that we know that are able to do that. Of other species that have things that are that have the potential to be generative, it's not as flexible as humans, right? We have, like I said, a finite set of words, and we can express an infinite amount of ideas with them.
Right.
And it's and it could have something to do with coevolution with culture, right? The way that our culture evolved and the way that genetics and culture co-evolved, the way that our brains eventually became. Noam Chomsky originally called it a language acquisition device, which is a euphemism for this nativist idea that we're born with devices that are active when the environment is just right for this certain Goldilocks period of time. And language is that, right? You try to learn language too early, obviously it's not going to work. But if you try to learn it too late after this Goldilocks zone, we also see difficulties in learning. But right within that, 3 to 5 year period, 3 to 5 year of age period, that's the Goldilocks zone. So our brains are kind of like built for that. We think in language, some would say. Our ability to use language and to write language and to engage in the kind of symbol system use that we do makes our brains unique. So maybe consciousness isn't unique to us, but our form of consciousness is, right? And that kind of gets to the core of consciousness being what it's like to be something. With that in mind, what we consider human consciousness might not look anything like, please forgive me, plant consciousness. Or dog, what is it like to be a bat, right? That was the name of the article that started this. We will never know because they use echolocation for everything, right? Our dogs live in a smell world. Bats live in a sound world. We live in a visual world. We have no idea how to think like anything other than us.
So I think that we've got a unique brain. I totally agree with Michael, but the question that I sort of wonder is, especially, and I've put the article about chimpanzees sort of making a pseudo language in sort of the side chat. Do animals have the potentiality to evolve into language using creatures? Can any animal evolve, given enough time and the right pressures, evolve into a language using animal? Are we truly unique in the sense that nobody can get to where humans are, or are we just the tip of the spear kind of thing, if you will? That's the question that I wonder about, and I think that Chris has an amazing point, which, you know, how do we envisage how a chimpanzee will cognitively view the world, or you know, evaluate the world, perceive the world? Will that be the same as a human? Are we close enough? Is there enough difference between us that we'll perceive it differently, or are we so genetically similar that, you know, we could sort of say, hey, that's the same kind of consciousness that we have? And do consciousnesses have a kind? Is there another way to develop consciousness, or is the human one the only one? Yeah, sorry, that was like 50 questions at once, so I do apologize.
All basically one, though. You know, is the human consciousness does it have more depth than, say, an animal or something like that? Is there different roots, evolution?
Yeah, or are we just looking at a sort of an organisms in animals, you know, that have specialized in different things than consciousness, so that they're not as developed, but could be? Is the potentiality there? I mean, some of the behaviors of, say, birds and things like that, especially the corvids, like crows and stuff, they're actually pretty scary how intelligent they are. You know, I remember seeing the crow dropping pebbles into water to get the treat to climb higher. That is the principle of displacement. It understands how displacement works. I mean, it doesn't have a formula for it, but it's understanding what it's doing. So would they have the capacity to have a consciousness like humans? I mean, if something is as conscious enough to understand displacement, is that something that couldn't rise to human consciousness? I mean, that's smarter than some flat earthers. That's smarter than some flat earthers, in my opinion.
What if they consider that consciousness?
Oh, burn.
Shots fired.
My presupposition is evolution, and therefore, obviously, the answer is yes to that question, because we evolved it. So, therefore, it can be evolved. But whether birds can do it or not, from my understanding, language is a particular or uniquely particular to us because of the way our larynx evolved, and that it was a part of our larynx evolving into being able to what's the word shape sounds much more vocally, much more complex, in a much more complex way than even our nearest cousins do. However, when you look at studies, I believe, between babies and chimpanzees, there's quite a lot of correlates between the two in the way they express themselves, the way they learn. Again, my presuppositions would say we learn through induction exactly the same way as the lower apes do. So, you know, again, it's all fairly routine from my perspective, but I grant it's a presupposition that we've evolved. Therefore, it's the things that we had a common ancestor with could evolve again. Right.
I think that's a fair induction. That I guess it depends if you think that, and the vocal. I don't see why language has to be necessarily a product of complex vocal systems. But I think you've got a good point. That's probably the, you know, so a lot of it we're talking about efficiency if we're talking about evolution, because if something isn't efficient, well, what's the point? So
yeah, I think the amount of sounds that we can generate, the different sounds that we can generate, give us this ability to have syntax and etc., to make these much more complex. What's the word I'm looking for? Sounds communication. Moist.
But it's
strawberry
kind of
cheesecake.
As Chris said, like we're a visual species, but our communication isn't visual, right? It's partly visual, I guess, but it's largely sound. So it's kind of
that's I mean,
a majority of our real estate. A majority of the real estate of our brain is dedicated to visual input. So, like, communicate everything, including communication. Like, the brain is mostly for vision. compared to the other senses.
And also, people have developed echolocation, right? A rudimentary sense of echolocation. When
And
you're
we quickly adapt to things
you're
like
blind.
sensors on the tongue for the blind that allow them to navigate space.
Mark, I really liked that initial question that you raised, which is kind of, could other animals achieve the same sort of like language functioning that we could? I mean, I think that's inherently a biological question.
Yeah.
So
sure.
anything I say here is probably stupid, but
No, don't be like that. That's
well, I mean, I'm just being honest. I mean, and I don't think that. So to be clear, like I was just speaking about it that way to kind of help formalize the question. I don't think there's anything philosophically unique about humans. I mean, biologically, I don't think I can make that sort of like delineation between. I don't think there's a hierarchy of being, as they would put it in the 18th century. Right.
Yeah.
But whether or not a species could does seem to be limited somewhat by biology, in that, you know, our closest ancestors, what is it, the new or the old world apes, the chimpanzees, right, probably could, but like a crab, probably not, right? So there does seem to be some limiting factors, but maybe that's just more of a biological question than anything else. Like, I don't think there's an ontological gap between human beings and other species in that regard.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that, and it's strange what humans, like when you say we've got this specialization, there's other things we have left over from our specializations, like the ability to sweat through pores on our skin. Is kind of a leftover evolutionary trait that people don't think about. They always think, well, humans have large brains and they can, have language and the opposable thumb and all these things, but they don't think about other stuff that are unique to humans. And being able to sweat through every pore on your skin is a very unique human trait. But dogs pant to reduce heat. Horses get a lather, but it's not every pore. We really have this odd leftover remnant from when we used to do persistence hunting on the sort of plains of Africa that people still use today. So we have a few specializations, but ones that we don't think about anymore. I think that but that's less obvious, right? I mean, we have a race in England where people race against horses over extremely long distance, and half the time the humans win because we're incredible endurance. But we don't think about that one too much because it's sort of not the, hallmark of modern technological society. It's kind of, interesting, but who cares? So it is, and I guess it leads me to, is intelligence and consciousness a huge benefit, evolutionarily speaking? Is it something that
Well, let's disentangle them. When we're talking consciousness, we're not talking intelligence. You can be conscious without intelligence.
But can you be intelligent without consciousness?
There is a slight answer to this, evolutionary speaking, which is to say the amount of energy it takes the brain, that the brain uses, is huge compared to the weight that it
Michael, you
occupies.
check your Discord.
And therefore, to say it must be, then that means it must be evolutionary really important. Otherwise, we wouldn't have specialized in it.
20 watts.
Highly.
The brain runs on 20 watts, as I understand it.
So, and it's like a quarter of the energy the body takes goes to the brain or something. It's a very large amount of the daily calories are used running the brain. And so, therefore, that says evolutionary speaking, that you have such a high specialization in something like that. it must have been extremely important for us to evolve that way.
Well, yeah, assuming we don't go extinct, and then it was sort of a sunk cost kind of thing that we specialized in this thing that went nowhere because our species is still pretty young. So, yeah, I mean, if we go extinct, then it wasn't, right?
Well, not really, because we're the apex predator. So we've already
You think so?
we've already justified. Yeah, clearly we're the apex predator on the planet.
I would
just stay out of the ocean. You're fine.
Well, I don't think we're the most successful organism on the planet. I don't think that can even be argued.
We've gone everywhere.
I don't know many things that hunt me.
Bacteria.
Food. Well, okay. Yeah, sure.
So bacteria, without a doubt, are the most successful organism on the planet. They are everywhere. They can adapt to way more situations that a human can. We rely on bacteria in our gut to even survive. There is absolutely no question that bacteria are the masters of this planet. That isn't even an argument.
Right. But when we talk about the prey-predator relationship, right, then it's built on top of. And the things that used to prey on us for food in order to survive.
Yeah, I don't know. I find I sort of find that sort of very, very simple, predator, apex predator kind of thing. That triangle to be really limited in what we're understanding. It doesn't convey and this is just me. I must admit, I'm not a biologist. I'm not anything. It just doesn't convey the relationship of ecosystems very well to me. I mean, we used to think the shark was the apex predator, and whoops, we find that, sort of orca prey upon them kind of thing in certain ecosystems, but not in others kind of thing. So, I don't know. I define this sort of simplistic sort of thing. I don't think it's as simple as that. And when you're looking at the flow of energy, like, when we die, our bodies release, all the energy goes, and then it's broken down into simple matter and then digested to make energy for other things, because that's what happens to organic matter. It is bacteria that will end up claiming that energy, getting that energy from us, and then it goes on.
The beginning of this conversation. The beginning of this conversation was about the human brain and how much energy was dedicated to the human brain. And the argument was, at least from Simus, that can be used as a signal that it's important evolutionarily speaking. And then that's where this apex predator kind of tangent came in. Right.
So I guess my point is, if that intelligence causes us to create something that destroys us, then it wasn't evolutionarily beneficial kind of thing, like if it actually is a detriment, but we won't know that for sure.
We're gonna die eventually, so no, I don't think that's a particularly
that's true.
Convincing argument.
That's true. No, I granted, the sun will expand.
I think it's always going to be relative, because that's how evolution works.
Yeah.
That's true.
There's no purpose to evolution, even though
there's no zero-sum game
of purpose.
Yeah.
Like the sunk cost thing kind of doesn't apply, evolutionarily speaking.
Right. Yeah, I think I get where you're coming from. So yeah.
And another way of looking at it, of course, is that we now control our environment. Our environment doesn't control us like with other animals.
Oh yeah, we've completely changed everything.
Well, that's a good point.
So in some sense, we've avoided evolution itself. So,
Well, kind of, yeah.
And only in the last 200 years has that happened, realistically, right? I mean, you go back to Victorian times, and infant mortality was through the roof.
Yes.
So,
No, that's a very good point. If you want to say humans are special because we've controlled our environment, I would get on board with that. I can't think of any other species, including bacteria, that have controlled their environment like humans.
Oh, yeah. You don't have to interact with nature. We humans have created environments where you don't have to interact with nature. Right? Concrete jungles, cities, metropolitan areas.
You start sweating, turn on
My
the air
argument
conditioner.
is all of that is a product of, this evolutionary specialization of the brain. Right? And the more it's done, the more it's reinforced it. The more it's done, the more it's usual evolutionary thing. Okay, so for me, that's why it's completely crucial, and it's the defining hallmark of our species that we are a thinking ape, as someone said.
And it's mostly our prefrontal cortex. From an evolutionary perspective, it's the frontal lobe, this area, but the cortex in general is larger. But I mean,
responsible for language, isn't it? Prefrontal cortex, language, and
no, language is actually in the temporal lobes, which are by your temples, and that's the Broca area and Wernicke's area for language processing.
What's the thalamic system? Because that's also quite highly developed in humans, isn't it? Is that correct?
The limbic or thalamic?
It might be. I'm not sure, but is it called the hypothalamic or something? Is that
so the endocrine system.
So the one I just want to make one quick point to you, Christopher, so you can talk about it. The reason I say this, of course, is because I found out, and what I was hinting at last time when I asked the question about lemon, was that
lemons.
Yeah. I know. I had another reason, but also it's because I was under the impression that the nose and smell is directly connected to that system, whereas other senses are not. They go through an intermediary thing, and
so
that's why
it
I would
is the
say
limbic
smell
system.
Limbic. Thank you.
So the limbic system. If you want to look at the brain as, do I want to disassemble it? Yeah, it looks like I'm disassembling it. So here's a sagittal view of the brain. Here is where we at. This is the brain stem, which connects to the bottom, your spinal cord. So your spinal cord comes up here, and here's your brain stem going up to your thalamus. Your thalamus is the relay station. It sends signals from your body to the right parts of the brain, and from the brain to the right parts of the body. And above that is an area called the limbic system that has your amygdala in it. And the amygdala is part of the emotional brain, mostly responsible for fear and aggression and anger. And less. But the limbic system is considered the emotional part of the brain. And with that in mind, bless you 100,000 times, brother.
Oh man, given another couple, it's usually 7.
And your olfactory bulb is right here, and it travels through the limbic system to get to the olfactory cortex, which is also in the temporal lobe. So some people say that because the signal, the brain signal, goes from the olfactory bulb through the emotional part of the brain to the olfactory cortex, that emotion is better able to trigger, to evoke emotional responses or evoke emotional memories. Something like that.
And what's your view of that? Do you think that's a likely story? Or?
I think that depending on who you talk to and what research they do, they'll give you a different answer, because I currently study the psychology of olfaction. Everybody I talk to thinks that what I just said is a legit reason. I also went to graduate school for music therapy and read a lot of literature on music research. Music researchers think music has a unique path to emotional memories, and they use Parkinson's patients as their example, and dementia patients, right? And dementia patients, when they listen to songs that were popular in their youth, they're able to be in the present and remember things in a way that they're not normally able to, because they're being ravished by the disease, the neurodegeneration. So depending on who you talk to, you get a different response. I think that there are many different ways to trigger emotional memories, and it just depends on the experience, what you pay attention to, what you're sensitive to. and all those other factors.
Excuse me.
MathPig, that's a problem, brother.
It's a it's a fucking family thing. My mother goes about 5 or 6 times, as does my granny. It's something that your nose tickles. You have, yeah.
Sounds like MathPig needs a nutty pot.
Take some Benadryl, man.
Hey man, I've got COVID. Just don't come into this room right now. It's all explosive, you know.
I had a follow up when we're ready, Christopher.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. Just say.
No, I was just curious. MathPig said he had COVID.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yep.
Yes, as of Friday.
I didn't know that.
Oh, sorry to hear that, buddy.
Yeah, that's.
In all seriousness, man, very. I wouldn't say non-symptomatic, but if you've ever went on, you know, a big bender and you've woke up and your throat is sore from shouting at a concert and stuff like that, I've got that sort of roughness in my throat. My glands are ever so slightly swollen, but no. Generally, I'm vaccinated and all the rest of it. Yeah.
That's how it was for me when I got it last.
This is my second
January.
time. This is my
second time.
flipping second time.
I had the same symptoms. I woke up and it felt like I was at a concert yelling all day.
Yeah.
Just kind of beat, exhausted, scratchy throat. But that was about it. But I've been double vaxxed and all that fun stuff too.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I don't want to sidetrack from Simos's question.
sorry.
I got to get a coffee, though. I got to get a coffee. I do apologize, but I love the conversation, everyone. I really am enjoying myself. So I'll be back in a sec.
Okay.
The super chat, MathPig.
Oh, Maynard saves. Thank you very much. Girl's a bully.
Wait a minute. Did Mark just go determine?
He's not. I wouldn't say girl's a bully.
Will?
Pardon?
Oh, good point. Yeah.
Because he just chose to go get a coffee.
Do you think a chimp would also go and get a coffee in the same situation?
Yeah.
Did you not know Arctic Timberwolf was a Christian girl?
No, I don't really. I didn't. I've seen the username around, but I've never really talked to him.
You really should send me a message on Discord, man. I could put you in contact with an awful lot of Christians and stuff like that, and provided that, you know, if you're decent enough and you don't go in and fucking act like Wildheart or anything like that, there, you'll get more.
Nah,
people.
you know me. That's not.
Yeah,
my
I do
style.
know you. That's why I'm saying it to you. There's an awful lot of them out there. They go, when you were live tonight looking for Christians, there was a Muslim channel and 3 Christian channels all live with at least 10 plus people watching, you know. You go out, go meet them, go talk to them. You don't have to talk religion, you know, just hang out, talk shite.
Yeah, no, yeah. Thank you for that. I'm not being condescending when I say that. That sounded
No.
really
I know
snarky.
as much as me, you know, I know I
mean it
was
that
a wee
way.
bit blunt in text. Text is very limiting and stuff like that there. And I was having a bad day and was a wee bit rude to you in the live chat. But, you know,
No, you
we're
weren't.
both aiming for the same thing. And we both have strengths where I would
You
have
did
weaknesses. Pardon?
You did strike me as a little spicy.
I was having a fucking bad day. I broke up with a girlfriend and shit.
When
and
you
all.
had, you took it out on me, but it's okay. I'll be Christ. I'll take on your punishment. But
You love a
said
spanking.
some-
We all
you
know
said
you
some-
love a spanking.
God damn
making me
girl,
paranoid.
You're getting really annoying because I was streaming. Because I joked about streaming at the same time you were streaming, and I was like, "Whoa, I was just joking." And besides, you're the one who's told me that you like competing.
Oh no, I'm admitting I was being a little bitch. I was having a bad day.
Oh, it's all good. It's
Hello. Snowball is here.
Oh yes, sorry. It's all about
Nobody
Snowball.
cares,
Snowball
midnight.
just arrived. Sorry, it's all about Snowball.
Hey, who was Headless Chicken? I love that name. I just have to.
It's the
I-
chicken
I'm
without a
headless.
head.
I'm headless chicken.
I
Hey, Samus, I think you had a little bit more to add. Why don't we get back to that?
Yeah.
Oh my god. Okay, well that's about as subtle as you can get. Okay, let me just take this fucking red. Oh, my cheek is so red right now. Okay. No, you mentioned something about an experiment where somebody was given a bad smell when they were doing many other things, and you
Yes.
said something about remembering.
A combination to a lock. This is an
Yes.
experiment we did in our lab, right?
And I was wondering if that tied in with this idea of the nose being connected to the emotional thalamic. Did you say thalamic? What did you say?
Limbic.
Limbic system. Yeah.
Well, disgust has evolutionary significance of, avoiding toxins. Excuse me. and getting rid of things that you've taken in that are not good for you. It could be. It would be a great argument for considering that fear, amygdala, limbic system, and disgust, right? That's like a perfect combination of factors to avoid, for avoidance behavior. I think it would be a good argument. I don't know any specific things about it. We were using it as for the purposes of cognitive load.
Right. So
Because we're monists.
So when you say cognitive load, you're not talking about the toilet or anything like that. Like,
I'm
You
talking
made a
about the hard
the bad
problem
smell.
of consciousness making me monist.
You might as well have said duty. Just say duty. Just get it over.
It's
I'm
when
a
you
moist.
imagine how bad it is that you're going to get it when you've had curry or something. That's
Exactly the smell. I mean, that's what I say. I mean, yeah, I'm a moist.
I call that
monist.
Johnny Cash in it.
Okay, I mean, I don't know. I was just trying to provoke you to talk about whether there is something to that, but clearly you don't think that just because the smell olfactory reception goes to this amygdala, did you call it?
Yeah, the limbic system.
Then you don't think that's significant, really, it being the only sense that does that.
I don't see nobody has a mechanism of action. Like, just because they're next to each other doesn't necessarily mean anything from a neuroanatomy perspective. Like, really disparate, weird things are right next to each other in your cortex. And so I just can't think of, like, I don't know what the mechanism of action would be. Could it? And I don't even want to speculate because I would just sound like an idiot. That doesn't mean that one doesn't exist. Let me make it clear. Because I can't think of one and haven't heard of one doesn't mean that one exists or one doesn't exist. It just means I'm not familiar enough with that material.
It would be interesting to study, though. I mean, like, I'll throw something out there and I'll sound like an idiot because I don't know what I'm talking about. Something like response time, for instance. Response time. You know, like maybe for some reason our smell needed to respond faster than other senses like sight or touch or, you know, the other senses. I don't know if
it's already a horrible mechanism of action. We have to wait for molecules from the air to go into our nose and get into our mucus and get to our receptors. Like,
right.
Sight is way better. It's an awesome proximal.
Yeah.
I mean, smell is good for proximal shit too, but I mean, sight is.
Well, you could argue the same for sound. It's got vibrations in the air has got to hit against the eardrum in a hammer. It's got a hit kind of thing, and then that's got.
Well, we were nocturnal, right? Our ancestors were nocturnal, so our sensitivity to timbre has everything to do with the fact that our hearing had to be supreme.
If everyone can, there's a wee poll. Just having a wee poll, just for fun.
And to think, we all started out as a worm at the bottom of the ocean. Maute knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Sounds like
yes.
nonsense.
Everybody read 7.5 Lessons About the Brain.
I can never pronounce the damn name. I'm not even gonna try.
Axolotl? Mexican walking fish?
Yeah, it's something. I don't know. I can't pronounce the name.
I love those things. Those things are amazing. Anyway, so I wanna bring up the elephant in the room, or maybe the I'm
not that big.
Is that a foot?
Oh, I see. Right, you mean the vertebrate?
The amphioxus.
Yeah.
Amphioxus. Okay.
Yes, that's the one.
So I want to bring up AI, neural networks, and
here we go.
Computers think. So Turing, basically, people know who Turing is.
Yeah, the Turing example.
Yeah. So his idea was
Alan Turing.
Yeah. Shred guitar player.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So his thing was, just because computers don't think like humans do, are they in fact thinking? and sort of was very adamant that they are in fact thinking. Because when you get down to it, there's even though the brain is way more sophisticated than the flip-flops and gateways that a computer is using, they both sort of have sort of the same kind of physical processes.
Careful.
I mean, careful. I've never been careful in my life, sir. What are you talking about?
He lives in a continent with more animals that can kill him than.
You know what? I always go, Australia's not that
Here's
dangerous.
my pet cockroach.
Well, I've always said Australia's not that dangerous, but then I remember there's like a beware of tiger snake signs just across the road from me, so it kind of is. I've got to try and find this photo I took. It's basically a children's playground with a sign in front saying "Beware of tiger snakes." It sums up Australia perfectly, perfectly.
I was thinking about
giant
the drunk
spiders.
I was thinking about the drunk kangaroos.
Yeah.
Oh man, if they want to get in a boxing match with you, whew.
Yeah, I'd be more worried about drunk people than kangaroos, but never mind.
Not if they were drunk.
If I can, Maute, would you? I think there's a person in the chat where I put the poll out and I was making a joke about the cult and stuff. Could you please give a quick, serious but not serious synopsis idea of what the goal of the cult is, please?
The cult? The dinner cult?
Yes.
You're asking me?
Yes, I'm asking
to talk
the
about
cult
the dinner
leader.
table cult?
I'm asking the cult leader to please promote their cult.
Too challenging.
First and foremost, I would like to make it clear
I love the mic
to
change.
one and all that you do not have to be in this cult. It is not for everybody. But what better time than now? What better place than this to be under the nurturing guidance of a benevolent dictator? Come to the dinner table. We're all family. We may have disagreements, but we'll still walk away as family, loving each other, giving each other back rubs, eating strawberry shortcake.
Cheesecake.
And we have lemon bars.
And lemon
We
bars.
do not have lemon bars. Lemon bars can go fuck themselves.
Yeah, yuck.
By the way, Maui, I found you a lemon bar scented candle.
Oh yeah, I saw that. Go fuck yourself and turn down your volume. You are loud as shit.
I
That's
never
ironic.
adjusted my volume. That's MathPig.
Come on.
Unless I
You
put
were
my
like-
hands over the microphone.
That's what. Yeah, you sounded like a bullhorn, man. It was like.
The idea of the cult is to get out of the cult. It's not a cult, it's a way of life. There's lots of bumper stickers, there's lots of things, but the whole idea of it basically in a serious format is people willing to have a conversation, people willing to not to take everything with a silver spoon up their ass and get all fallen out over shit. Have a conversation, take other people's opinions, and if you've got an issue with that, you can always fuck off and leave. So it's just, you know.
Yeah. There's always that. It's
Thank you,
my
Michael.
Michael.
Thank you
You
very
rock
much,
my fat
Bye,
ass.
Michael.
I can't wait to
Amazing.
talk more
Thank you,
because
Michael,
you
for
agree
coming.
with me.
We're
As
good
always,
listening
peace
to
and
you.
respect, Michael.
Thanks,
a lot of respect.
MathPig.
There you go.
I love him. It's true.
Just out of curiosity, when you and Michael get married, can I officiate it?
No.
Really? Oh, I feel jaded.
It's not that we're gonna get married. It's just that he's too good for me. I'll never. He doesn't even see me like that.
I can
I'm
just see
trying to
it now.
imagine MathPig
Same Oz in the
officiating
background,
wedding in that-
playing acoustic.
that accent.
Yeah, I don't think it would work.
Yeah, that accent saying, do you take Christopher Mullen to be the lava leveler?
I do not sound like that. What the fuck?
Yeah, that
I love
accent.
it. Yeah, I
Yes,
can't do
not
it
to.
properly. I'm terrible at accents.
I'm gonna glad get agate. Kind of tattoo.
Leo Phileas.
Hello, Leo.
The silliest.
Eco which.
That's what
Evening,
I'm gonna
Leo.
call him. Leo Phileas, the silliest.
Hey, does GeoSam do graphics?
GeoSam
does.
is graphics.
Ooh.
GeoSam, we need to talk man. Man, James saying we need to talk, man.
He's currently doing the graphics for Fabio and Funk.
We need to talk.
He's doing the graphics for me, doing the graphics for Rage, he did the graphics for Wild, anything 3D. If you need something done in GIMP without the leather and the zips, Geo is your man.
Without the what?
Leather and zips.
Oh.
GIMP
Not heard
mask.
that expression before.
No, you don't know what a GIMP mask is.
Oh, a GIMP mask. Oh,
Yeah, ask your mum.
yeah.
Of course he knows.
Wow.
Oh.
You precious little flower.
I'm a sunflower. Not to be confused with sunflower.
Oh no, that's terrible, mate. That's terrible.
Every time I hear that,
Sunflower is just a happy little daisy, isn't he?
every time I
Oh,
hear
it's
him
the
talk, I just want
right.
to slam my head through a fucking
Ray of sunshine.
Yeah.
window.
He's in the cult. GeoSam's in the cult, by the way.
Ah,
Yeah, I know.
Every time his voice cracks, he just gets more attractive, doesn't he?
How was
gets
yourself
very
tonight,
shrill.
Leo?
Hey, are you in the cult,
Leo?
Leo?
Leo, did
What
you
cult?
catch any of the streams that any of us were having tonight, or did you just come in to talk?
Oh, I just came in to hang out. I don't care if I'm talking, but no, I didn't. I've been playing
I
Wizard
would definitely
101.
recommend watching Maute and Maute and Micheal. It was an idea. Shh. Consciousness. Where does it come from? What is it? A psychologist and a philosopher meet.
Oh, well, I mean, I would say that the answer to that question is actually rather easy. Consciousness is a result of the totality of the neurophysiological processes occurring across the brain in its entirety as it interfaces with itself, the rest of the human body, and the vibrant and massively active reality into which it is continuously submerged.
You sound like Terry, but go on ahead.
Terry.
I don't.
Who?
Turi? Oh, I know. And the world was created in 7 days, and this is represented in the fact that there are 7 days in the week, and so that's how we know that God exists.
How did
Good
you
old
get Terry
Terry.
from what Leo
Cast iron.
said?
Oh,
Fine,
Gerd,
that
did
one.
you kick Terry or did Terry leave? Because he appeared on mine earlier for a while.
No, Kenny was like, hey, I did not come here to debate another Christian, which I thought was kind of funny because I had 3 Christians in the room. I was the only atheist, and they wanted to argue amongst themselves instead of trying to convert the evil, sinful atheist. So I said, okay, yeah, Terry, we've got to wrap this up. And so he said, okay, I'll bow out. He said a few things, and then he left. And then I saw him come to your stream. Yeah, I was spying a little bit on your stream, MathPig.
It's all right. We had Skylar over here too. Skylar joined for a while.
Scattered?
That guy fiction.
Skylar fiction.
Oh, Skylar. I thought you said scattered. Yeah. I saw
No,
Skylar.
not Sky Out. Sky Out was on Praises.
No,
channel.
I thought you said scattered, like scattered across the field or something.
Guys,
Skylar.
now we're just doing drama bullshit. Fuck yourself,
Yeah, I
Gur.
like Skylar.
Leo talks.
Gur is
too
hard
much.
of hearing.
What?
What?
See what I did there? Yeah, no, I like.
Can I
Skylar.
ask?
Pretty
May
good.
I ask?
Scalar.
May I ask? KELVY. Kelvajo. How do you pronounce that?
Quato.
That was a great attempt.
Could you speak a wee bit louder? Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Kelvin Quayo?
Calviquayo.
That's my guess. I don't know if it's right.
It's completely fabricated, so whatever you.
Kel. Can I call you Kel? Is that okay?
Kelvy's good. Kelvy's fine.
Kelvy,
That's
right?
how do you
Okay.
pronounce it? However you want, my friend.
Kelvy, I would, from the conversations earlier in the live chat, would you be a Christian then? Would you be a theist? Is it that the impression I got? Would I be correct on that?
That is accurate.
On the
Wow.
thoughts of the thumbnail that I had earlier for the whole hangout earlier, not relative to this one, on the idea of which church is correct, would you be of the mindset that, you know, regardless of who you bump into, if they claim themselves to be a Christian and that they are a nice person, they follow the gospel, they follow Jesus, that they are going to heaven? Or would you feel the need to poke at them, find out what their dogma is, and then tell them that yours is correct and theirs are wrong?
I think there's one very simple gospel message, and it's a matter of believing that or not, regardless of your flavor or your culture of Christianity that you follow, or your traditions. I do think that there is one simple message, and
which is what?
The gospel.
Oh.
The gospel.
Well, that's not telling me much.
Well, in saying that, Simos, if you were watching earlier, that's something that I mentioned with James. If someone said to me, I'm a Christian, I take them as someone who follows the gospel, someone who puts the New Testament more prevalent than the Old Testament, and if they're from America, their politics are slightly right-wing. That's all that someone says to me about Christians.
Okay.
Well, I don't know about following the gospel, where you said, because it's rather something to believe. Following is everything that follows from believing in the gospel is sort of, in my view, in its own category, versus believing it and then being, as we say, spiritually born again, transformed by believing it.
Well, that's where the conversation comes from. If you just come to me and I ask you, what are you? Are you a non-theist? If someone said to me, I'm a non-theist, I would, not have a question. If they said to them, I'm an atheist, I can get a straight answer from that. If they said I'm agnostic, I can get an answer from that. If you said to me you're a Christian, what that says to me is Gospels, New Testament over Old Testament, and if you're in America, slightly right-wing.
Maybe. As far as the right-wing thing, I know there's a lot of people that, well, that's the thing. A lot of people in America, as well as many other places in the world, think that just because you were born in a Christian family that you're a de facto Christian. Just like, because in a lot of other cultures and religions, they don't really care about your personal faith. They just care that you're an open member of this religion, and it's usually because you were born in this country or this particular family. But Christianity, in my view, is a little different. Like, I don't think anybody's actually born a Christian, or is they're Christian simply because of their culture. Although I do acknowledge there is cultural Christianity.
Okay, well, could I ask you then, would you define to me, if I walked up to you and I said to you, I'm a Christian, what would that say to you? Without you asking any other questions, we've just met, you were like, right, we're having this conversation, what are your beliefs? And I say, oh, well, I'm a Christian. What would you take from just me saying that?
I guess it would depend on what mood I was in, but if I was trying to ascertain
right now, this conversation we're having with all these people.
For real, I would say, oh, so you literally believe a man was risen from the dead? Like, that's pretty crazy for a person to believe, right?
So you wouldn't, right? So when I say to you, I'm a Christian, you don't think, this is what this person is. You instantly assume something I believe and then attack me for it.
As far as not believing that so yes, if you said I'm a Christian, but then your answer was to the negative of actually believing that Jesus was risen from the dead, I don't know if you would consider that an attack. However, I would probably say you're not actually a Christian. If you don't believe Jesus was risen from the dead, I would probably try to do it as in a cordial way as possible.
So for you, a Christian is someone who believes that Jesus rose from the dead. That's what I'm asking. That's what I'm saying. Trying to get to.
Yes.
Right. So your definition, if I come up to you and said, I'm a Christian, without asking any other questions, you would assume that I believe Jesus rose from the dead. And that's it, nothing else.
Well, if I assumed you were being truthful that you actually were a Christian.
Genuine interlocutor.
But if somebody was
Christian,
then that would probably be, to me, that is one of the essentials of being a Christian, is believing that a person rose from the dead.
Going off nothing else, right? And then Gur walks in, and Gur's all, I'm an anti-theist, I'm this, that, and the other, and all the rest of it. Fuck God and all that shite and furrows and bullshit, right?
Yeah, I'd say it just like that. Yeah.
Just like that. He'd probably throw in some insult to MathPig, call me 4'2" and a leprechaun or something while he's at it. But
that part's definitely true.
Yeah. Do you look at me as someone who's just said, I'm a Christian and want to ask me questions, or do you look at Gur and want to ask Gur questions? Which is more important to you? Do you think that my religious beliefs are wrong and I deserve ridicule for it, or do you think that the atheist deserves more ridicule because they don't believe at all? I've worded that very badly.
I'm not really a big fan of ridiculing people in general. So, no.
Would you argue with Christians online about gospel dogma and what gets you into heaven?
Oh, I very much often do.
Very much often do. Right. Would you argue with atheists about what is God, what gets you into heaven, and what you need to do?
I do this as well.
Right. Which annoys you more? The fact that these Christians have a different belief, or the fact that the atheist doesn't believe? I think I worded that better.
Okay, so just going along with your questions, because as far as like being annoyed by one or the other, in my view, for somebody to claim that they're a Christian but yet to speak something falsely about the gospel, I would think is more annoying than anybody else just simply claiming to be an atheist.
So you would feel the need to correct the Christian more than you would to convert the atheist?
Well, no, I find that trying to correct the quote unquote Christian is less fruitful than just simply one thing I do, and it's probably the philosophy behind a lot of it, is I will just simply make an open declaration that I believe that they are wrong, just simply so that anybody else observing it can just simply be made aware that there are other Christians that disagree with what this Christian is saying. And then I try to state the reason why rather than just bloviating, right?
Would you be open to just accepting the fact that that Christian, under their belief system, and if the main goals are there, are going to heaven? Why is it, I don't want to use the phrase more important, but why is it important to you to point out the falsities in the other Christian than it is more so to say to the atheist, come be saved?
Well, it depends on the environment, right? I mean, if it's for example, like specifically a Christian channel where everybody on it is supposed to be a Christian, but there's one guy teaching something that's completely non-Christian, somebody might hear that and think, oh, that must be what Christianity is, versus somebody that was an atheist on there, and then they're just simply, because as far as I'm concerned, there's Christians who are saved, and then there's everybody else, whether or not they're an atheist or whether or not they're part of another religion or just simply a theist, right? So the atheist, just simply looking at an atheist like that, I mean, it's sort of more blended to permeate it, just the knowledge that these are people I believe are not going to be going to heaven versus a Christian. And a Christian in itself, I do think a Christian could actually be saved and yet still be teaching some very erroneous doctrine, which even still sort of would annoy me more in that regard. But I don't kind of look at it with that kind of dichotomy, like, oh, these are the annoying Christians or these are the lost atheists. Which one do I kind of like? It's just sort of
subscribe to a particular denomination yourself. Sorry to interrupt.
No, not particularly.
Okay.
If
I mean, I could put some labels out there, but
you've got a hangout with 5 Christians and a spare slot, and you've got a hangout with 5 atheists and a spare slot. Who do you join?
Yeah, that's got to really depend on my mood, I think, especially these days.
That's understandable.
Now, however,
I can definitely
I've only recently, for the last maybe year, been doing anything like this, and it has been with Christians, not necessarily with atheists. Not out of me simply trying to do that, but just this is the first, I think, all atheist panel I've actually gone on during this entire year-long foray into doing this, which that hasn't been like on purpose. It's just sort of been the way it's gravitated.
No, well, I understand that with the YouTube algorithm, if you watch certain things, they will promote you. You need to make an active effort as a person to step outside that, because the YouTube algorithm will force you down rabbit holes in particular things. So unless, say, Gur turns up in maybe Bruce's stream, you'll never know who Gur is because YouTube ain't going to let you.
Nobody wants to know who Gur is.
Mark said it. I just agree with it, but Mark said it.
I find it funny that the people that I agree with happen to be the smartest people. Isn't that funny?
You're welcome.
I think everybody would say that, though,
Oh,
right?
I know. That's what's so funny, guys. Like, It's funny how we can be like, oh, this person is so smart. Oh, by the way, I agree with everything that they're saying. Maybe that's why I think they're so smart. Anyway, that was way out of left field. I'm sorry.
Okay, right. Just to ask Kelvy, right? As you said, you've been in the community for about a year or so, or whatever, this internet thing for about a year or so, and you've been mainly in the Christian community. How long would you have had interactions with us crazy fuckers on the other side, the non-theist, how long would that have been happening? As you say, this is the first time, all of us, but...
Well, as far as YouTube chats like this and online chats, because since I really started using the internet on a full-time basis when I back in like 2003, I was on lots and lots of message boards doing that sort of thing, arguing with people and debating with people a lot. Although I wasn't doing that as a Christian, however, I was a theist at the time. I was like a pagan theist, basically, to keep it simple. And I argued with people online up until 2009 when I became a Christian, and then after that, after finally sort of ensuring that I knew what I was talking about, that's when I started then in turn arguing pro-Christianity rather about before I just simply argued pro.
And did you move from your paganism, sort of pantheism, sort of God spiritualism into then Christianity, and that confirmed that you felt more confident to go and talk, or were you always a Christian and then sort of wanted to hone your game?
No, I definitely don't think I was always a Christian, but it wasn't until I had argued enough, because when I first became a Christian, one of my number one goals after that, I believe, was to try to talk myself out of being a Christian. And if I could do that, then Christianity obviously is not true. So I sought.
So you weren't always a Christian?
No, I think I became a Christian in 2009.
Okay, what were you? Like just a general non-theist before that, or did you believe in God but you just
I was a practicing pagan.
Okay.
I was into like a lot of I would have called it druidic shamanism or something like that at the time, whatever kind of
okay.
What was it that gave you the sort of the nudge or the kick, or the sort of, was it the questioning of trying to slam down what paganism was that led you towards Christianity, or was there something in particular, like a personal testimony, like, you know, fucking angel Micheal appeared out of nowhere from the trees and spoke to you or something? Was there something that happened that pushed you from out of paganism into Christianity?
It was sort of a series of things. Ultimately, it ended up being going to a Bible study with somebody who I knew who was a Christian, going there just really to argue, and then being unable to answer certain questions, and then leaving that Bible study still unable to answer those questions, and then having that really, really bother me until finally I realized that the answer to it was what it was.
So it was sort of, you know, the more you question paganism, the more that you found Christianity to have more validity to it, in your opinion.
The point with paganism was there was basically the realization that no matter how valid paganism, you know, whatever that means, right? That's a very open statement. However valid that could possibly be, it still ultimately doesn't give anything any meaning to anything, and there's still ultimately nothing that we can truly know about anything, because there's nothing that we can ultimately validate through our own perception and kind of sort of like a Hegelian sort of.
Wait, so you're a verificationist?
You tell me.
Yeah, could you? Yeah. Whenever you say, "Are you a verificationist?" by definition of, and follow it up.
Well, I don't know what you mean by of. Verificationism is just the idea that nobody can claim to have knowledge of something unless and until it can either be A, empirically verified, or B, it is like just analytic, where it's just like logically tautological. Like, say, a bachelor is an unmarried man. We don't know that empirically, but it's just true tautologically by definition. So a verificationist is going to say that those are really the only two ways that we can claim to have knowledge.
That sounds logical. I think I could probably agree with, because one thing that bothered me about other pagans, I didn't get along well with other pagans, because one of my views in the paganism was that whatever God was, or whatever the source of all creation was, there's no possible way we can fully know what it is or what it's called or what all this and that. And then I would go to these like pagan meetings. I didn't go to many of them because after a few I was like, these people are all whack jobs. For the most part, But because they would be like, oh well, my real name was Son Josh from the realm of Yigida. And I'm like, yeah, how do you know that? How do you know that that's what it is? Well, how do you believe that? Because I just do. And I'm like, you don't really have because I believe that there was truth, but that for a human being to actually ascribe a name or a label onto it instantly makes it not truth. So whenever somebody was giving me a definite claim about something, to me, I instantly was like, nope, you're either lying or you're totally self-deluded. So then I'd be like, well, maybe I'm self-deluded. But then again, I can't be self-deluded about the fact that I might be self-deluded. So I kind of kept that sort of that mindset going onward, as far as just to try to keep as skeptical as possible about all things. Even while, because I as a pagan and that sort of thing, I have seen my personal verification on my own of supernatural events, but I still understand that's not proof to anybody else. So for people, when I see a lot of people expecting other people to simply take their word for it, that's often something that's annoying as well. Like, well, I've seen all this stuff, so I know that it's real. It's like, okay, well, you can't.
I was just about to say, if I can say bye to Gur and give him a last question, but
I think I'm interested in the catalyst for when you crossed over from pagan to Christian. Like, what was was there a catalyzing event, or was it just sort of a gradual? Because you sort of said that you realized there were things that paganism couldn't answer, and I get that, but what about it for Christianity? Was it sort of you going, oh well, it answers this thing and that's the thing that catalyzed it, or was it sort of a gradual thing? Does that make sense? Sorry, I feel like I'm not saying that very...
No, it's the same question I was asking. What was it that triggered the movement from paganism into Christianity?
Well, I mean, it might have been a gradual sort of, one thing after another, sort of a change of stance, I guess, over a long period.
If I may, what was it that Christianity... What question was it that Christianity answered that paganism didn't?
Perfect question.
Well, see, the interesting thing is, and I guess maybe what makes it difficult to answer is that I did believe in some kind of a God before I became a Christian. So there wasn't anything that made me realize suddenly that there was something out there, because I had always believed that there was something out there. You know what I mean? So I don't know if that's going to give you the proper kind of answer there.
No. What question did Christianity answer that paganism didn't answer?
Well, I had a notion that there was a God, right? And then I also had a notion of what this God should look like and would look like based on my own observations of what general human life looks like, as far as the notions of love and that sort of emotional stuff. And previously, I did not really see that in any experience in any religion, from any God, from any religion. However, in looking at Christianity, that is actually what I found was the case after actually looking at it without trying to not look at it. And the actual question that was asked of me during that Bible study was, well, if you believe that there's a God, then why don't you want to figure out what he wants from you? And why don't you try to do what he says? And I really, because I was trying to be like, yeah, there's a God, whatever. Maybe, yeah, Jesus can be God, and that was born as a man, but what does it have to do with me? But they said, well, if you really think that could be God, then why aren't you trying everything to try to figure out if it is or not? Because I was taking it very flippantly, and I really couldn't answer that question. And he also asked me if I thought that God was angry, and I remember getting really angry at that question, like, how dare you think that the pure God can ever have anger like that? To me, that was
so.
Insane.
Why didn't that question apply to, I don't know, say Buddha or several other paganistic versions like the Hindu gods? I mean, why specifically is that question applicable only to Christianity?
Sorry, you mean like, why don't you do what God wants?
Well, no, you were kind of implying that it was omnibenevolence that was the triggering process, but then you changed it to say, why don't you try and figure out what Jesus wants, or Yahweh, whichever word you want to use, And I'm saying, well, why didn't you feel that about other religions like Buddhism or Hinduism? Why didn't you figure out what the Hindu god wants, or the Buddha wants, or
Is it just that you're a Christian Bible study? Was that sort of the?
that doesn't
So
really.
thinking back at that time, my view of other deities were basically that, again, if the deity had any kind of form or shape or any sort of anthropomorphism whatsoever, I generally instantly was like, okay, this is quite obviously a reflection of the human ego in some way, including all of the the Hindu gods. Now the Buddhist god, I don't think that we'll probably argue over the nature of the Buddhist god, but again, that's just being a set of well, I guess we could argue about what Buddhism is, but as far as being an open proclamation of salvation, that sort of thing to the world. But sorry, I'm not. Let's think of this question some more on the difference between Buddha. So you asked me basically the difference between Buddhism and Christianity.
No. I was saying that why didn't you? The question that you posed yourself, that these Christians posed to you, right, could be posed by any religion to you, and you would still come up short because there is no answer for it.
Well, I don't really know. I've never really seen a proclamation of the Buddhist god. I've seen proclamations in writing, rather, of plenty of other gods and deities. The Christian god seemed to be the after looking into it, seemed to be the most, believe it or not, the most abstract, which to me was that made the most sense.
I mean, I would argue that Allah is more abstract than Yahweh, as a concept, right? Same God, but different concept.
Well,
and if you want to go for abstract,
if you look at everything that's tied to the revelation of Allah versus the revelation of Yahweh, I think there's a huge discrepancy there. But that's a whole other branch of because Yahweh says there's no form, he has no image that can be seen or created or replicated except for a word.
That's why I said it's much more abstract, right? So it can't be
what,
the abstract.
what exactly do you mean by abstract?
An Abrahamic God, then yeah, I would agree.
Abrahamic God has a lot of associated words, right?
Is more abstract than
he's a burning bush. He's he has many concrete forms that he's revealed to mankind over the years, whereas Allah has never revealed himself directly.
Well, what's the Quran?
Well,
isn't that supposed to be eternal?
No, that comes through Gabriel.
Yeah, but the words of the Quran are supposedly eternal, right?
Sure. Yeah, I mean they're divinely inspired.
Besides Allah, that's eternal. That doesn't really make any sense.
Well, I don't see why it doesn't make any sense. I mean, that's.
Well, there can be one
thing
more sense.
Sorry, what did you say, Kevin? Kevy?
There can only be one eternal being. Although I guess they don't think that.
Yeah, but Islam says that. Islam would confirm that there is one eternal being.
I'm just trying to find out what was unique about Christianity that dragged you that way rather than many possible other ways. I don't think it can be omnibenevolence. I don't think it can be the abstractness, which are the two answers you've given so far. So is it really cultural appropriation? I mean, this is the culture you're born into, and so therefore it seems the most likely to be true to you, which is a good answer. Don't get me wrong.
Well, right before that, well, not right before that, but maybe several months, a year, I remember actually looking at all other religions. Islam, one of the first ones, because that actually, kind of based on what you said, that made the most sense because the Islamic God did seem to be the most abstract. Yeah, you're right. I did look at that as a possible, just kind of like looking towards a deity, just to kind of just mess around with it. I also looked at Baha'i and that sort of thing. It didn't take much of studying the Quran for me to just, and then looking further into it, and then after looking at Christianity. One of the first things I did was actually hold it up against Islam, as far as just general knowledge about it and what sort of information.
In fact, if anything, of the three Abrahamic faiths, Christianity is the least abstract, funnily enough, isn't it? I mean, even Judaism is more abstract than Christianity.
I would say.
What do we mean by abstract? Or
Application.
I don't.
Well,
But
I
again,
think-
we read about the Quran and where the obvious misapplications of historical information in it. Again, it didn't take long for me to realize what it was. Another fake religion.
What's a fake religion?
I don't know what you mean by misconceptions on history.
Like, for example, where
Quran to be more honest in terms of its pursuance of history.
honest.
Yeah.
What's your gauge for that?
Oh, with such things as they talk about the caliphate quite openly. They're not hiding away from what they want the end result to be. All people coming to Allah
Islamic
and
theocracy.
believing that Muhammad is
about how the Bible
last prophet.
talks about slavery as far as honest deliverance of events.
If I can just say, going to do a 10-15 minute warning. The people on the panel are more than willing to hang about and have a banter and stuff offline and stuff like that. But I'll be in about 10-15 minutes. Got other things to do, and it's time for late night and work to do tomorrow and stuff. So.
No worries, MathPig.
Yeah, no, I appreciate everyone
Yeah,
coming
sure,
tonight.
no
I had
problem.
lots of fun earlier, lots of fun with Michael, lots of fun here, but it's getting late and stuff.
Oh, anyway, yeah, it's a pleasure to talk to you, Kelvy. So no worries. I don't mean to stress you out with any of these questions.
No,
just
they're very
fascinated
good
to know,
exercise.
like MathPig, I'm fascinated to know why you thought that Christianity was the one, and what actually made you push towards. Well, you've said now, right? It was talking to some Christians that asked you.
Well, like I said, there was a large series of things that happened as long as some study that went into, like, I didn't have some giant, the light came down from heaven and touched me on the forehead moment. But all you're asking me is, why didn't you? You're asking me negative questions like, well, why didn't you see that this was this? Why didn't you see that this was that? And obviously, my views were, I saw this in this thing. Then obviously, I'm not going to be able to necessarily say, oh, I didn't see this. Although I kind of can. If I have time, that I did explore Islam, but Islam, as far as some of its renderings of what it reports, for example, where Allah says to Muhammad, or says to Jesus rather, why did you tell the people to worship Mary and God and yourself as a Trinity, which didn't happen? You can actually trace misconceptions. You can trace the misapprehensions of the religious doctrine through. Geographically through all the way up to Arabia. I mean, it's pretty clear, like how these things developed.
I'm not convinced by that, because it also says in the Quran that Christians believe Jesus is the Son of God.
Okay.
So I wanted to ask, you didn't get touched by a ray of light or anything. Would you say you've had an experience since becoming a Christian that you would call supernatural or revelation from a God?
Well, looking around at basically every single thing that happens in life, reflected off of like a prayer life and that sort of thing, it's kind of hard not to, but that's not gonna give you much, because then you're just like, well, you're just confirmation biasing every single thing.
Okay, I just wonder whether you like supernatural or not, sort of. So I'm really looking to see if you've had an experience that you would say is I guess mystical, revelatory kind of thing, like something that isn't intellect and more spiritual.
You mean like having a vision or something?
Well, I mean, you tell me. I don't know, but a lot of Christians talk about sort of having it revealed to them and having a personal revelation from God, in a very supernatural way, like, the Holy Spirit kind of thing.
Yeah, I think, which is not like a lot of other Christians, I think if somebody gets, like you say, a personal revelation from God, I think it should generally stay personal. Because again, I don't think that anybody. I don't think God expects anybody to believe anybody else at this point. Now, if we were living in a Bronze Age, Iron Age tribe where we all had our own, the same priest and we all had the same temple, it's just a different story. But we're in a different age now, so a lot of stuff that I believe should apply specifically to Israel in their time. Christians seem to want to apply to modern time, which I don't think applies. Now, I also should add that when I was a pagan, I did have numerous supernatural experiences, that sort of thing. So I think if I had one now, it wouldn't really... Like when I hear about a Christian talking about supernatural experience that they had, generally I'm skeptical. And I'm usually like, well, I had something like that when I was a pagan, so it doesn't prove anything to me, right?
Right.
Have you had any supernatural experiences since you've become a Christian?
Well, that's my question.
Well, yeah, I think my entire disposition on existence is a supernatural change. So I know that's a really bad answer, but that's my answer.
Okay.
Well, I know. I meant, like you said, you had supernatural experiences when you were a pagan. Have you had any of those type of experiences since you've become a Christian?
Oh, I see.
I mean, that stuff like seeing ghosts, communing with spirits, Ouija boards, freaking
whatever they were. Yeah.
Crap. No, not at all.
Okay, interesting. Okay, thank you.
Except for things basically that are sort of too subtle to really be able to convey, like praying about something and then suddenly something happens that makes you think about the fact that you prayed about something, and then that made one thing lead to another, like a Rube Goldberg, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, hey, this is happening. Oh, wow, hey, I prayed about that earlier, forgot about, there's little things like that, sure, if you really wanted to think your way out of it, that it's meant nothing, it's all coincidence, you could certainly choose to.
No, I'm asking about it from your experience, not rationalizing it from some other worldview.
Yeah, it's all your perception, Kelby. So, if you think it is, then...
Yeah, and if it seems like... Yeah, like I said, I did this prayer, or just in general prayer life, just speaking as a Christian, and that doesn't touch towards supernatural, but for example, if I prayed in the morning before I left for work, and then no matter what happens throughout that day, I kind of know that I prayed. Whereabout if something happened, like say something is really bad happened, and then I didn't pray that day, then I'd be like, oh man, now I don't think God punishes people for not praying. Don't get me wrong, but if I did pray, at least I sort of would have the outlook of, well,
yeah,
whatever happened, I know that that
peace of mind in some sense. Is that what you're referring to? Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to defend any sort of, like I said, confirmation bias or whatever at this point. I'm just telling you how my general surface of my
Mark, have you? I have a follow-up question, if you don't mind. All right, go ahead, please. Well, my follow-up question was: you said it was omnibenevolence that was you came to the. I say that, but I think you used the word loving God.
Yes.
Is that right? Yeah. So that was important to you.
Yeah, you said that's not possible or something?
No, I didn't say it wasn't possible. Again, we're talking. I'm trying to explore it from your point of view. What I kind of said is that other gods have that, so it can't be that alone, which convinces you. But then you said many things did. But now I just want to go back to that point and just ask you about why you didn't have that in your paganism.
Well, when you say other gods, that's sort of one of the issues, because there in my view, even as a pagan, there could only be one source. So there could only be one singular source of anything. Now, whether or not, like how we chose to personify it or call him God or give it a name, or that sort of that was always the issue. So I never really thought that there were a whole bunch of gods. I did think that there were a whole bunch of beings, and that I was one of them, and you were one of them, and all this stuff. So in that regard, then perhaps we could all at some point become our own sort of quote unquote gods. That's why my avatar has been Q for the last 20 years or so.
Yeah.
Although for a
okay.
different reason now than it was back then.
Yeah, Q's fucking the whole Picard thing and all that there. Yeah, just to shout out and stuff. Seriously, gonna be winding down and all the rest of it. So if anyone wants to do shills or if you want to work around the room and shout out yourselves and stuff, this is the time.
Well,
And midnight starts. I love that. That's hilarious. Go on ahead, midnight.
I started
I have-
reviewing Lord of the Rings on my channel, the Rings of Power. I'm reviewing that. And I also have started mostly for Flat Earth. Started doing Kerbal Space Program demonstrations. I'm going through the space race. I'm at 1963 is going to be my next video of just demonstrating orbital mechanics and how the different
Cool.
So sub to that. I usually do those live. They're usually like 3 hours. I try to make them short, but
You and Leah were gonna be good friends.
So you watch Rings of Power, I presume.
Yeah, I still have the last one.
Do you watch House of the Dragon?
No, none of those. I happen to have an Amazon account when that came out, and I used to run Lord of the Rings MERP tabletop game since I was like 13 years old. So as a game master, and I still have like stacks of books, and I've studied on the Middle Earth lore for most of my life. So then I was like, all right, I'm going to review these things and see how much of a hate watch I do for them.
Okay. Anyone else find it funny that that the Christian uses a picture of Q?
He explained that like less than 3 minutes ago. Were you not listening?
No, sorry.
Jesus, why are you even here? man?
Midnight just got here.
So you
2.5
went
minutes
first,
ago.
right? Just to clarify. No, they went first. Then the particular person explained Q, and then okay.
Look, and plus, like, even if you are a Christian, it's a great character.
Well, no,
Like,
it is. I just find it interesting.
No, not you, Midnight. They're talking to the Christian. They said that. Shh, a minute.
Well,
Pretty much, like God wants to be, or Satan, or like it's the ultimate. Well, you know how the atheists are always accused. Oh, you want to be God. You want to be your own God. Whereabout I think Q is the like perfect representation of a human type being trying to be God or wanting to be God. Because if you look at the original Star Trek series, there's always these supreme being aliens, and also one of the animated series, there's a proto Q character who basically is Satan, who claims that he came to Earth, tried to help humanity, and a bunch of Puritan-like other supreme beings punished him for it. At the ending of it, they actually rescued Satan in a witch trial, and it's very interesting.
Which animated series? The Star Trek one?
It's called The Magics of Megas 2 is the episode. If you look that up, it's Satan does magic on the bridge. It's amazing.
Is this original series or Next Generation?
The animated series from the 70s.
Oh, no one cares about that shit.
That writing is still Gene Roddenberry, and it's still the right voice actors. It's still Kirk and William Shatner and all the original. And the writings, I'm telling you, the writing isn't that bad for the animated series.
Well, I have a quick question for you.
Better be quick because I'm trying to end this. So come on.
Okay, well, end it and we'll talk
All right.
backstage.
So, guys, I was wondering, there was a subject I was wondering if you guys were interested in talking about before we end here real quick. What do you guys think?
I love you, Leo. I think you're fantastic. You're great. But shut the fuck up.
I'll just
Alright.
plug my channel. I'll plug my channel.
Plug
I
your
do
channels.
debate.
Yes, everybody do a show.
Yeah. I do debate and talk with theists and stuff. But come on if you want to see some debate and slightly weird Australian guy having really ridiculous conversations. But,
You're Australian?
thank you so much.
They're actually really good, and everybody should go check them out.
Oh, thanks, Leo. And check out Leo as well. He's incredible. If you can understand what he's saying really cool shit.
And I may as well just show mine. So Monday, 9 o'clock UK time, Fabio and Funk reviewing Formula 1 Japanese Grand Prix.
And if any, hold on. Yes, for Simos, we have a command. It is apostrophe.
We now have a command.
Yes, well, we always had a command, but now it's more.
Japanese Grand Prix, which is on in 2.5 hours. Starts in 2.5 hours. So I'm staying up. So I know you're tired, Matt, but I could do with this going on.
Technically not tired. I'm just going to
There you
have
go.
to go and do something else that's more important.
Okay.
But if you're live,
And,
I'll
thank you
go
for
ahead
this.
and
Thank you for the chat, Galvi. That was interesting.
Yeah, I definitely did, and Kelvy, call back anytime.
Like to.
Yeah. Anyone else like to
I would
show?
like-
Get out,
like to know
Clockwork!
more-
No, get
more
out,
about-
get out.
Yeah, Clockwork, get out.
Get out.
Well, Kel, I would like to talk to you once the stream ends. At least for a bit. If you can.
Leo, would you like to show yourself?
No, I don't really have anything to show. I probably won't be making any videos until mid next week.
All right, well, I'll shield Leo. Leo's a incredibly smart guy with a lot of knowledge in different fields, and he just does discussions and sometimes debates, but mostly just discussions, right, Leo? And does some really, really cool stuff on physics and cosmology and philosophy, economics, whole range of subjects. Very good. Check him out.
And well said. He's the only person.
Oh, hey, I wanted to ask Leo a question. You've never seen the Star Trek cartoon series from the 70s?
No, I've never seen anything.
We're not
from
even
Star
going
Trek.
into that. People, thank you very much for coming back tonight. Check out Micheal Grando's stream, the whole point of the after party and everything that happened before. Like, subscribe. Thank to everybody, subscribers, members, Patreons, all the rest of it. And yeah, don't forget, people, to think for yourselves.
Heinous.